Masechet Yevamot, Daf Peh Bet. We're in the middle of a discussion of this Mishnah here, where we saw that Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon say that androgynos kohen is considered like a man, and therefore, if he marries a Bat Yisrael, he entitles her to eat terumah. Right? He can eat terumah, the marriage is valid, and she can eat terumah as well. Good, everyone agrees to that. The question is, what about Kodesh? So Resh Lakish says he entitles her to eat tirumah, only tirumah, because that is derabanan. In other words, we're not really sure if his androgynos is totally a male, so derabanan will permit it, but not for Kodesh, which is deoraita. That's Resh Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says, I think terumah is deoraita, and therefore there's no difference between her eating terumah and her eating kodesh. Yes, she can eat that as well. All right, that was the machloket. Resh Lakish brought a proof from fig cakes. Fig cakes of terumah are batel if they fall, if the falls 1 into 100. And why would it be batel? Must be that it is midrabanan, because even though something that is enumerated, it's still batel. Resh Lakish thinks usually something enumerated is not batel. Here it is batel because terumah is derabanan. That was his proof. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, I think it's doraita. And the reason why the fig cakes are batel is because they're not always enumerated. Sometimes they're sold by weight. Instead, Rabbi Yochanan brought a proof for himself that terumah is deoraita from this baraita. And this is, we're going to spend most of the day today analyzing this baraita that we cited yesterday. So let's review it. The baraita has two parts. The first part talks about tum'ah, this is tum'ah kodesh. Kodesh, that's tameh, that gets mixed up with 100 pieces of kodesh that are tahor. So the tameh is in the tahor. That means usually a kohen can eat it if it's tahor, but now that some tameh mixed into it, he cannot eat the tameh. But if it's 1 in 100, ta'aleh is permitted, and the same with bread of kodesh. Good, that was the resha. The sefa gives a different case and says if tehorah falls chatat tehorah, that falls into cholin tehorot. So in this case, the kohen can eat the chatat tehorah. Anyone can eat the regular cholin, and so falls in 1 into 100. Here we say lo ta'aleh, because this is only a small loss. A kohen can eat the entire mixture, because he can eat the chatat tehorah, and anyone can eat the cholin tehorah. So since the kohen can eat it, we're not going to bother saying it's batel. Rabbi Yochanan decided this as a proof that even in kodesh, which is for sure deoraita, nevertheless we do have bitul. So this is a proof that things that are not always enumerated can be batel and deoraita, even though it's deoraita, and therefore the same would be true for the fig cake. So this is a good proof for Rabbi Yochanan, and it is a challenge to Resh Lakish. So we asked Resh Lakish, what are you going to do with this? And he says, oh, no, this is talking about a case where the meat has dissolved. It's not there anymore in and of itself, and therefore it's not something that's enumerated. It's not even there. It's not something that's significant. So it's dissolved into the stew, and that's why it's batel. But if it was whole, then no, I would not say it's batel, because doraita. And that's what difference between this case and the fig cakes. All right, all that was review. And now we're going to ask, Aval lo nimoach mai. Okay, Resh Lakish, according to you, what if it did not dissolve? If the whole pieces of kodesh are there, tameh in tahor, what would you say? Lo ta'aleh, then it would not be nullified. So we now have a question. Adetani aval chaticha shel chatat tehora shitarava be'me'ah chatichot shel cholin tehorot lo ta'aleh niflog v'nitne bedida. I have a question. There's two clauses in the Mishnah in this baraita, and the baraita wants to show a distinction. In the first clause, it is batel. In the second clause, it is not batel. So usually, when you want to make a distinction that are close to each other to show where the dividing line is. So why in this baraita does it give a case of hatat tehora that mixed up with chulin tehorot in the second case, which is a faraway case. Why not talk about a split within the very case of the Resha? Niflog v'nitne b'dida b'amedem emrim v'sheni mocha, aval lo nimocha lo ta'aleh. You should say, when is the kod tahor that falls into tameh? When is it true that it's batel? Only if it's dissolved. But if it's not dissolved and still whole, then it's not batel. Talk about that very case itself. Why are you jumping to a different case altogether? That's a question to Resh Lakish, and he answers, Tehorot bitorot adif le. You're right, it's true that it would be not batel if it was whole pieces, but the Tanav, the Baraita, wanted to teach an extra chidush, that even though it's tahor in tahor, which in other cases makes it easier to for something to be batel, because all tahor. No, he wants to teach in this case, it's not true, it's not batel, tahor betahor, for the reason we cited, that the Kohen can just go ahead and eat the whole thing, even though, so it's only a small financial loss. But you're right, really he could. All right, fine. That's acceptable. Uresh Lakish, Maisha na Resha, Maisha na Sefa. But now we have a question. If, in fact, the Resha is talking about it's dissolved, that means the Sefa is also talking about a case where it's dissolved. So if it's dissolved in the Sefa, then why don't you say that it's batel? So what? So in this case, it's tahor that fell into tahor. It's right. It's kodesh that fell into chulin. All tahor. But it's dissolved, so it's not there. So he should agree that it should be batel in that case also. That's a fundamental question to Resh Lakish. We're going to have three answers to it. The first one we will uphold. The second two we're going to reject. So the first one, therefore, is a good one to concentrate on. Amar Rav Shisha bered Rav Idi, Resha betumat mashkin de Rabbanan, Sefa de Oraita. Okay, so back in that Baraita, there's another condition that doesn't say. This is a big okimta, a big limitation on the case, that it doesn't say anything about this in the words. Okay, but we have to assume that the Resha, which says it is batel, that is talking about, and even though it's dissolved and batel, that's talking about where that kodesh became tameh, fell tameh into tahor, only on a derabanan level because of liquid. Usually, liquid does not make vessels tameh, but midrabanan it does, and therefore, if tameh liquid touches a vessel and the vessel touches the kodesh will be tameh midrabanan. That's why in the Resha we say it is batel, whereas the Sefa is talking about a deoraita case. Remember, the Sefa is talking about kodesh that fell into cholin. So kodesh is prohibited to a non-kohen mideoraita, and that's the reason why there we do not say bitul. Okay, so it is in fact a drabanan versus a deoraita. So based on that, we ask, aval tumat sheretz mai lo ta'aleh. If the Resha had been tameh by tumat sheretz, a tumat deoraita, then you would say it is not nullified in that first case. Then we have a question about the phrasing of the Baraita. Instead of the Sefa being a case of hatat tahor that got mixed up with cholin tehorot, why not niflog v'nitne b'dida? Why not talk about a case that is more similar to the Resha? You should have said, when do we say it is batel? When it's only tumah derabanan. But if it was tumah deoraita like sheretz, then it would not be. Why'd you go jump to a different case? The same answer as before. Torah bitorot adif le. We want to teach this extra chidush, that even though it's tahor and tahor, and you might think, oh, so that's batel. No, it's not batel. That was the first answer. Now we're going to have a second one. So the first answer is that the Resha is Tumah Dirabanan, Sefa is Tumah Deoraita. Is is a prohibition that is deoraita. Okay, so now the second answer. Rava amar resha isur lav, sefa isur karet. No, I could say that. In fact, both of them are talking about a deoraita prohibition, and the resha is talking about a tum'ah that goes onto the kodesh on a deoraita level. But if a kohen eats kodesh that is tameh, that's only isur lav. And so therefore it is batel. Whereas the sefa, which is talking about a non-kohen eating kodesh, even if it's tahor, it doesn't matter, that is an isur karet. So isur karet is more stringent, and we will not, we say it's not batel in the sefa. So that's Rava's answer. Now we ask on that, Rava, Huda Amar, Kol bedoraita, lo shena isur lav, lo shena isur karet. Rava himself said in another place, we actually found this we're going to find this all the way at the end of this Masechet on Daf Kof Yod Tet, where actually it says Rava, not Rabba. Okay, whoever it is, he says, as long as it's deoraita, it doesn't matter if it's isur lav, and it doesn't matter or if it's isur karet, there will be the same law regarding bitul. So here, how could he say there's a distinction between lav and karet? Kashya, you're right. This is quite a difficulty contradiction to Rava. And so therefore we go on to the third answer, which is Rav Asher Amar Sefa Mishum Dahavele Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin Chol Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin Afilu Be'elef Lo Batil. In fact, they could also say they're both Deoraita. The first one, the Resha, is talking about Kodesh that became Tameh, and that will be Isur Deoraita, Tuma, that's Deoraita level. And the Kohen is not allowed to eat it mid Deoraita. Nevertheless, it is batel. The sefa is talking about a non-kohen eating kodesh, which is also deoraita. Both are deoraita. But here's the difference: in the sefa, someone can eat it. The kohen can eat the entire mixture because it's kodesh tahor into holin tehorin, so it's permitted to a kohen. That's something that's permitted. So therefore, don't rely on bitul. Whereas in the resha, it's something that no one can ever eat. A non-kohen cannot eat kodesh at all, and the kohen cannot eat it because part of it is tameh. So therefore, we have to rely on bitul. And we have a principle: anything that will become permitted is not batel, even 1 in 1,000, like an egg that's born on Yom Tov. Don't eat it now, you could wait till later. So even if it gets mixed up into a lot, it's still not batel. So that's Rav Asher's answer. Seems like a good answer. There's a difference between them. No, but we have to reject it. Rav Asher bedutahi. This statement of Rav Asher is a fiction. It's a mistake. He could not have said that. Why? Leman ile kohen mishra shareh il Israel olam asur ela Rav Asher bedutahi. Basically, the principle of Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin means that something that is prohibited to a certain person or group now, but if you wait a while, then it will become permitted to that same person or group. But here, there's no change in the status for anyone. If, regarding a kohen, the kohen can eat it now and can eat it later. There's not going to be any change. Whereas for Israel, it's prohibited now, it's going to be prohibited later. And so we cannot apply the principle of Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin when it has a static status. And so, therefore, it cannot be that Rav Asher said this. I mean, he might have said this principle in general, but not in this. He didn't. It was not applied to this case, and so therefore, this is not. This is also a fiction. And the first answer, that is between the Rabbanan and the Oraita, the Rabbanan Resha, the Oraita prohibition, the Sefa, that's the one that stands. All right, so that answers the questions for the Resh Lakish. And now we turn to questions to Rabbi Yochanan. V'sabar Rabbi Yochanan, Teruma bizman hazeh de Oraita. Does he really think that Teruma is a Deoraita prohibition nowadays after the destruction of Bet HaMikdash? V'hatanya shete kupot, achat shel chulin, v'achat shel Teruma, v'lifnehen shete sein, achat shel chulin, ואחת של תרומה, ונפלו אלו בתוך אלו, הרי אלו מותרים, שאני אומר, תרומה לתוך תרומה נפלה, וחולין בתוך חולין נפלו. Okay, so here is a baraita that's talking about teruma. So we want to see, we're analyzing, based on this baraita, we're going to prove that teruma has to be the Rabbanan. Okay, and let's see how we do it. The case is 2 large baskets. one is full of chulin, and one is full of teruma. And in front of them there's two se'ah, a smaller container, and these are also labeled. One is chulin and one is teruma, and they have some chulin and some teruma already in them. And then someone comes and he pours the one of the big baskets into one of the smaller ones, and the other big basket into the other smaller ones. But when it fell, we're not sure which fell into which. So we say both are mutarim. Those small se'ah that says had teruma in it, we assume that the basket of teruma, big basket of teruma, fell into some teruma from there, fell into the se'ah that had teruma in it, so Kohen can go ahead and eat that. And the other se'ah vessel that had some chulin in it, we assume that it was the big basket of chulin that its contents fell into the se'ah, and that is permitted even to a non-Kohen, right? We just assume that it happened the right way. 50-50 chance. Now, why are we assuming a 50-50 chance? You see that we're being mekel. That makes sense because it's d'Rabbanan. If it's d'Rabbanan, sefek d'Rabbanan lehakel. But if it's d'Oraita, why would you say otherwise? Okay, we're just going to add one more complicating factor here. Amar Resh Lakish v'hu sherabu cholin al hateruma. Resh Lakish says, I'm only going to permit this if in this se'ah vessel there was already 51% chulin, and then something else fell into it. And so that way, in any case, I have a majority in there. Rabbi Yochanan says, even if it's not a majority, even if it falls in and it's 50-50, I'll still permit. Now, according to Resh Lakish, everything makes sense. First of all, Resh Lakish thinks that the teruma is the Rabbanan in the first place. And he's going and adding an extra chumrah that even though it's the Rabbanan, he still wants there to be a majority of chulin in it. The thing is, with the majority, that helps a lot. Even if it were a deoraita problem, but on a deoraita level, something can become batel in a majority. Only midrabanan for teruma do we need 1 in 100. So for Resh Lakish is saying, even though it's drabanan, we're going to treat the drabanan like a deoraita, because when the rabbis make a gezerah, they make it like a deoraita, and therefore I want there to be a majority. That will reduce, even if it were a deoraita teruma, it'll reduce it to a drabanan because it's batel in a majority. And then we'll go ahead and say, you know what? Since there's a majority, it's drabanan, so we'll assume the right one fell into the same. So Resh Lakish is no problem. He goes above and beyond. He thinks it's Rabbanan anyway. But here's the big problem is for Rabbi Yochanan, Kashya. Since Rabbi Yochanan, first of all, he doesn't even need there to be a majority of chulin in the se'ah, even if it's just 50-50, and he thinks that teruma is deoraita. So now you have teruma, a deoraita prohibition, falling into something where it's 50-50. So it's not batel on a deoraita level, not even on a deoraita level, and yet this baraita says it's permitted. So this is a really strong question against Rabbi Yochanan, saying that teruma is deoraita nowadays. So we answer, Hamaneh Rabbanan hi. Oh, actually, Rabbi Yochanan was only saying this baraita is the opinion of Rabbanan, who Rabbi Yochanan agrees that the majority opinion of Rabbanan is in fact that teruma nowadays is the Rabbanan, and so Rabbi Yochanan would agree with that regarding that baraita. But Rabbi Yochanan was explaining our Mishnah, and if you remember, look back again, our Mishnah was Rabbi Yoseh and Rabbi Shimon. There he was explaining Rabbi Yoseh's opinion, that Rabbi Yoseh thinks that teruma is deoraita, and therefore, if he allows the androgynous wife to eat teruma, then it should be the same for Kodesh. He was only explaining Rabbi Yosef's opinion, who disagree with Rabbanan. All right, that's a good answer. Now, how do we know Rabbi Yosef in anywhere else says that teruma is deoraita? From this, the Tanya Beseder Olam. Seder Olam is a very important midrash written by Rabbi Yosef, Tanaitic Midrash that gives history and years, calculates the years of all events throughout Jewish history. And in it, it says, Asher Yarishu Abotecha V'Idishta. It asks a question, how come this pasuk in Devarim repeats that your fathers inherited and you shall inherit it? Why two inheritances? Yerusha Rishona Ushneya Yesh Lahen Ushlishit and Lahen. Is to teach that the first inheritance at the time of Yoshua is significant. And the second inheritance, when the Jews came back from Bavel, that also was significant and made the land Kedusha. So that means in between, it was not Kodesh when they went into exile, so they had to re-sanctify it. But the third return that will happen in times of Mashiach will not have a third inheritance because the sanctification already happened in the second, and that was permanent. So the point is that the land of Israel is already sanctified after the returnees from Bavel, and that sanctification is permanent. Sanctification of the land means that Terumah is Doraita from then and on forever, even after the destruction. Rabbi Yochanan himself said that Rabbi Yosef is the author of Seder Olam Rabbah. And that's why when he saw Rabbi Yosef in our Mishnah, he says, oh, Rabbi Yosef, he thinks Terumah is Deoraita, and therefore, just like an androgynos kohen permits his wife to eat Terumah, which is Deoraita, so too he would permit his wife to eat Chazeh and Shok, Kodesh, which is also Deoraita. Okay, very good. Now, back to what Rabbi Yochanan said in that case of the two baskets. Does Rabbi Yochanan think that in a Derabanan, so now Rabbi Yochanan agrees that baraita is only going to Rabbanan, not Rabbi Yosef. Rabbanan who think that Terumah is Derabanan. Yeah, the Rabbanan say that Terumah is only Asur mid-Rabbanan. So that's talking about that case. And Rabbi Yochanan disagreed with Resh Lakish, whereas Resh Lakish said, they both agree that Terumah is the Rabbanan. Resh Lakish nevertheless required an extra chumrah that you should have 51% in the basket already of chulin, and then we can say whatever comes in after we can assume is also chulin. But Rabbi Yochanan did not require that. Why not? I mean, it makes sense conceptually. Why not? We could say safek, even a 50-50 safek midrabanan lekula. The problem is there is a Mishnah mikvaot that looks like a pretty similar case, and yet is machmir. Let's look at this interesting case. Vatanan, mikveh sheyesh bo 40 se'ah mechuvanot. You have a mikveh has exactly 40 se'ah, not one drop more or less. Perfect. It's kosher. Natan se'ah v'natal se'ah kasher. Now you come and add liquid that is mayim she'uvim, which is no good. That's according to Rambam's explanation. That she says fruit juice, which is also not good. So let's assume like Rambam. I think it reads smoother, which is a dirabanan problem. Bucket water. You add more water from a bucket into this mikveh. Now that's totally fine. Once a mikveh has 40 se'ah, you could add 5,000 gallons, and it will still be fine as long as that first 40 se'ah is kosher water, rainwater. Okay, so natan se'ah, and now here's the thing: v'natal se'ah kasher. I put in 1 se'ah of drawn water, and then I remove it. It gets mixed in, and then I remove a se'ah of the mixture of water. Is still kasher. Why? Because even though what I'm removing is a mixture, so I'm removing some of the kosher water, and what's left is going to be not a 40 se'ah of kosher water. Nevertheless, it's okay because when I put in the drawn water, it gets all mixed up. It's batel. And once it's batel, that drawn water has the status of kosher water. And therefore, when I take out, I have 41 se'ah of kosher water, I take out one, I still have 40 se'ah. It's totally fine. Now, how much can I do that? We're not talking about doing it over and over again. You can do it over and over again, even 1,000 times. By the end, there'll be 1 drop of kosher water. That's okay. But here we're talking about that first time that you do it, or any time you do it. How much can I add? Right? Can I add 40 se'ah and then take out 40 se'ah? No. Rabbi Yochanan says only ad rubo. only 19 se'ah. I can take out 19, but not more than 19. In other words, I have 40 se'ah. I can add 19 more, and then take out 19, right? That would be okay. I have to make sure that a majority of the kosher water is left there. And that's permitted, right? So this is a question, because you see, according to Rabbi Yochanan, I do need a majority to remain of the original water to remain there. So I'm adding 19, taking away 19. But if I add 21 and take away 21, then I'm not going to have the majority. So you see that according to Rabbi Yochanan, 50-50 is not good. I do need a majority of the original to be there in order to permit this new stuff that is added. And so this seems to contradict what Rabbi Yochanan says here, that even though this is all the Rabbanan, that's why Rambam reads more smoothly, because Maim She'uvim is the Rabbanan. Fruit juice is the Oraita. Okay. Anyway, so this is a contradiction between the Rabbi Yochanan. So we say la de la nishkol rubo. No, when he says until a majority of it ad rubo, he didn't mean that a majority has to remain. He meant that don't take away a majority. Don't take away 21. But if it's 20 exactly, that's okay. He does not need a majority. Even if it's equal, that's permitted. That's the same as what he says regarding the two baskets. That's one answer. Or a second answer. The cases are very different, because here I can say this she'ani omer. That was the words in the Mishnah. Right here, the word she'ani omer. So in that case, because it's all dumped together, so I can assume she'ani omer. I assume that yes, it was the cholin that fell into the cholin. There, it makes sense to apply that principle. But in the case of the mikveh, I cannot assume that all of the water that I added in is the same very same water that I took out. There's no way that assumption is true. I put the water in, it gets all mixed up. And that's why when it gets all mixed up, then you have to make sure that you're only adding in less than 20 and taking out less than 20. I need a majority of the original, because it's all mixed up. So I need the concept of bitul. So bitul is going to work only if there is a majority of the original permitted thing. That's when I need a majority. But in the case of two baskets, I don't need the majority, because I can use the assumption that everything that was added is all chulin, 50-50 chance. T'Rabbanan, I'll be mekel. And so the cases are actually fundamentally different. All right, and that concludes that section. And now we're going to go on to the next part in the Mishnah. We continue with one last question to Resh Lakish from the Mishnah itself, which says Tanan androginos noseh. Let's look back at the Mishnah to remember this clause. Here is Tanakama says androginos noseh aval lo nisa. Androginos can marry a woman. And sounds like lechetechila, he can go ahead and marry a woman. But he cannot be married, meaning a man cannot marry him, because he is considered a man, and therefore cannot be the recipient of marriage from a man. Then we continue with Rabbi Eliezer Omer, androginos chayvin alav sikila kezachar, androginos that engages in bi'ah with a man is considered mishkav zachur and will even receive sikila. So both of these are saying that the androginos is considered a male. Therefore, if it's considered a male on all these levels, can perform a full marriage, can get sikila, then therefore, if it's a man, then he can go ahead and marry a woman. And if he's a kohen, she should be able to eat teruma deoraita and eat also kodesh. So that's what we see here. And therefore, how could Resh Lakish disagree with that? That's our question. Androginos noseh. Doesn't he noseh the chetechila? No, but Resh Lakish says teneh im nasa. The Resh Lakish says no, change the word to If he married, if an androgynos went ahead and did kiddushin with a woman, then they have to get a divorce. You need to require a get, because safek, we don't know what he is. Maybe he's a man, require a get, but lechatechila, we would not allow this person to. So really, it is in fact safek, and that's why he can only entitle his wife to eat teruma d'Rabbanan, but not deoraita. Okay, so now we ask Resh Lakish, hold on. Vehan noseh katani. The word says noseh in the Mishnah, not nasa. You can't just go ahead and change the word because it's more convenient for your opinion. Resh Lakish counters, v'letamich mai avalon nisa. Yeah, but look at the next clause says, he cannot be married to a man. Isn't that a diavad statement? Ela mai nisa diavad, no sename diavad. Since the second clause says she cannot be married as a woman, and that's stated as a b'diavad, not even b'diavad. So too, the entire part, the first clause is also b'diavad. If he marries, we have to worry that the marriage is valid because maybe he's a man and they need a get, but maybe not. It's only a safek. We reject that. We say no. Amre lo. Noseh lechatechila mashma, aber lo nisa diavad name la. No, the two clauses are separate, and it wants to emphasize that this person, androgynos, is 100% for sure considered a man, and that's why we allow him to marry a woman. Lechatechila, go ahead. And if he does if a man does kiddushin with him, we even b'di'avad, we don't consider it anything. They could just walk away, and the man will not be required to give a get to the androgynos, because there's no possibility that he is a woman. There you go. So the Mishnah reads just fine the way it is. Okay. Resh Lakish has one last challenge. The very last phrase says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, androgynos chayvin alav sekila kezachar, mikla detana kama sapuke misapekale. Since we have two phrases here, two opinions here, and Rabbi Eliezer seems to disagree. Rabbi Eliezer says, by putting his name first, and then Omer, he means he's talking about the same subject, and he's disagreeing. He says, I think that androgynos would be chayav sekila. That's because it's considered full male midoraita, and you wouldn't stone someone if you weren't sure. And so, therefore, you see, Rabbi Eliezer thinks it's zachar for sure. He must be disagreeing. So, it must be a Tanna Kama is not 100% sure. Is a safek. Okay, good question. And we answer no. Ben lemor mishat peshit haleh. No, both Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer, they have no doubt that androgynos is treated legally like a man. Ika benayu. What's the difference between them? Sekila mishne mekomot. Demor sabar chayav sekila mishne mekomot. Demor sabar kezachar. The only question is regarding in what case would you consider a man being with the androgynos as mishkav zachur? Is it from two places or from one place? The Tanna Kama says he from two places, meaning if a man has bi'ah with this androgynos shelo kedarka, that's for sure sekila. But even if he has bi'ah from the androgynos's female organ, that also would be liable to sekila as mishkav zachur, even though it's not the usual way of mishkav zachur. So that's Tanna Kama. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer, look at his phrasing, he says chayav alav sekila ke zachar. By adding the word ke zachar, he says no. A man who is with an androgynos will only be chayav sekila if their bi'ah is the way it usually would be with two men, which means bi'ah shelo kedarka. According to the Rabbi Eliezer, if the man has bi'ah with androgynos through the androgynos's female organ, then that is not considered mishkav zachur and not sekila. That's the only difference between the two. But when it comes regarding androgynos, what is the status? They all agree that it is 100% a man, and that therefore that rejects all of Resh Lakish's responses. We are left at this point without an answer for Resh Lakish, although it is possible to suggest an answer, which is that this entire time in the questioning we were assuming that this statement, Doginos Noseh, is a continuation of Rabbi Yosef's statement, right? Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yoshimon, first they say one thing about Terumah, and then they continue talking. But in fact, Rabbi Yehuda interrupts in the middle, and so therefore Resh Lakish may be able to answer that this statement, Doginos Noseh, of Aldon Nisa, is not the opinion of Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon, and so that would be a possible explanation. So we end this line of discussion now, and we'll continue more about the definition of androgynos on the next stuff. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen ve'amen.